I want to try to leave enough time at the end of the class to go back and review some of the things that you'll be addressing in your exam on the book of Ecclesiastes. If you had to pick out a favorite or a significant, I don't know how we're favorite, significant, important, central word or point in the book of Ecclesiastes, what would it be? Vanity would be it. It sure will. Okie doke. Really will. Surely will. Well, Ralph, would you lead us in a prayer, my friend? Amen. Thank you, sir. The writer of the book of Ecclesiastes is who? Solomon. Solomon was a poor man, right? Anybody around any richer than Solomon? He was. What's this fellow's name? That's the richest fellow now going around. Is in the Musk. Thank you. There, yeah. Yeah, he could out Elon Musk, couldn't he? And what have you? Wisdom. Why did Solomon get so much wealth, by the way? Was that wisdom? God added the other, didn't it? It's a great thing. So. And so when we look at the book of Ecclesiastes, what type of person do we have that's actually writing this letter to us today? A man who had everything he wanted, and a man who had all the wisdom and knowledge that man could possess in that day and age. And yet he talks about some things in the book of Ecclesiastes that just seem so, depression? That's right. Reason being is the view from which Solomon speaks. What view does he speak from? Do I? Earthly view, doesn't it? And the phrase we find in the text is the phrase what? Under the sun, isn't it? That's exactly it. So given life on this earth, as it is, and the fellow says anybody that wants to could take the book of Ecclesiastes and he can find himself in there somewhere. And as it is, and give that life as it's viewed just simply and totally from earth's perspective, not taking into account God, life apart from God, that's the idea, apart from God. Vanity of vanities, all this vanity, saith the preacher, chapter 12, I believe, verse 7. So. But add God to it, we go back and we see we have blessings, we have provision. What does he say about taking and using things we have, eating what we have, and enjoying them? Do it because we know these things come from God, and that ultimately we will be a great benefactor from the Almighty God. Let's look at chapter 10. He's going to talk about some uncertainties of life and disruptions of folly. And so, uncertainties of life. Let's look at these verses very quickly. This latter section of the book of Ecclesiastes goes pretty quickly. And we already kind of have the background and the frame of mind, I guess, in position to think about it. Dead flies, that's a good way to start off an evening, isn't it? And the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. And then the word there is so doth, that word's actually introduced. He says, a little folly, him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. So, many dead flies does it take to mess up the apothecary? Just one or two will do the job on it. How much folly does it take to interrupt and disrupt a person's reputation and his wisdom? Doesn't take very much at all. Just a little folly is really ruinous in the process. You might think back just as a way, David's life, he's such a great servant of God, and yet there was one event which David did which really, it was not good. And he had the consequences. He had the consequences. What are some of the consequences, by the way? This is off target just a little bit. What are some of the consequences of David's life because of that? Huh?
4 of his sons died.
I didn't hear you.
He had 4 sons died.
4 sons died. One of them even tried to take the kingdom from him, didn't he? And so his
Well, what about when he had the census, when God specifically said, do not count the people?
Yeah.
And he counted them.
Yeah.
So God took, what, 150,000?
That's another issue in David's life. Yeah, well, sure is. It doesn't take much, somebody be of good reputation and have a good reputation and everything else, and one foolish act can destroy that man's reputation. That's the same today. Same today. And so it's a precious thing. A good name, I think we read somewhere, didn't we, that a good name is something about a good name. But good name is better than precious ointment, back in chapter 7, verse 1. One foolish act can destroy your good name in the process there. And so he says in verse 2, a wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. What do you mean? Why? Right hand, left hand. What's on the right hand? Yeah, okay. What's on the right hand? Remember the account when the Lord in Matthew 25 come with his holy angels, and everybody's going to be gathered before him. He's going to separate them as a sheep separates his sheep from the goat, and put the goats on the left hand, puts the sheep on the right hand, doesn't he? So it's a place of honor. Christ is sitting on the right hand of the throne of God, Hebrews chapter 1. So is in his right hand. A wise man's heart is that which is going to be upright and honorable. He's going to be in accordance with his life as God would have it to be in the process there. And he goes through. So let's go. Verse 3, yea, also when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth. Where he says to everyone that he's a fool. Here's a man that says he's a fool walking by the way, and yet he talks about him having wisdom. What kind of wisdom is that? I think so. I think so, but not really. And it's going to fail him. And he's going to say that. How is he going to say to everyone he's a fool? By what he does, right? What he says. Doesn't take long, dear folks, to listen to somebody and kind of tell from whence they're coming. And really does. So verse 4 says, if the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. The idea simply seems to be that if somebody raises up and makes some charges against you, don't just stand your ground in an honorable way. Don't act like someone don't act like that which you're accusing, you're charging you doing. So just be firm and fast and honorable in God's sight, if you will. And I kind of put these words beside verse 4. Said be cool, calm, and collected. So, verse 5, and on to some frustration, 5 through 11, some frustrations of life under the sun, and things that sometimes say get out of joint. There's another one of those idioms, isn't it? And process. So there's an evil which I've seen under the sun, an error which proceedeth from the rulers. So talking about rulers, folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low places. And so sometimes who is it sits up in places of authority? What kind of purpose? Yeah, folly, foolish people. Seen servants on horses, princes walking as servants among you. And Solomon says, I look around the world, you see servants who are riding on horses, which would be a place of prominence. And you see those who are supposed to be and they're down here acting like servants. Verse 8 talks about one who digs a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. And there. So that's a good thing to think about. And what about the idea of digging a pit and falling into it? Huh? Yeah, you know. So it says you set a pit supposedly for somebody or something else, and you end up in it because, I guess, would that be a way, kind of way of saying you reap what you sow? Yeah, and you break a hedge, a serpent shall bite him. What's the idea of a hedge usually? What's the purpose of a hedge most of the time? Huh? Yeah, lay out property lines and things all the time, isn't it? And so if you violate somebody's property judgment there, you know, you might get bit with a snake, if you will. Same thing, idea of removing stones will be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. And so if the iron be blunt, if the axe is blunt and do not whet the edge, then you got to put a lot more strength to it. But wisdom is profitable to direct in the process. So verses 8 through 10 really goes through sort of some proverbial type expressions. And you dig a pit, you fall into it, and so you remove somebody's boundary, you're going to end up in a problem with that. And that's a good thing. What about verse 11 where it says, the serpent will bite without enchantment, and a babbler is no better? And you have to wait for the serpent to sing out his noise before he bites you, if you will? Yeah. Talking about digging a pit and that thing. You remember a fellow back in the Old Testament by the name of Haman? In the, yeah. Huh? Yeah, with his news. Yeah. Haman built a gallows. Who was he going to hang? Mordecai? Mordecai, whichever you prefer. Who ended up being hanged on that thing? Haman did, didn't he? 75 feet high. And sometimes it works that way. So there it does. And so you got a serpent, you know, they usually don't tell you when they're going to bite you, and that's the way a babbler is. A babbler is somebody, you know, he just always there, ready to pop off at the mouth, I guess would be one way of putting it. And what about verse 12 when he talks about the idea? Here's some lessons that's good, and the words of the wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool will swallow himself. Show who he is. What about 13? The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness. What about the end of the talk is what? Mischievous madness. Fools full of words, and cannot tell what shall be and what shall be after him. Who can tell him? And so that's one characteristic of a fool. He's always got what? Something to say. Can't get him to shut up. And yeah, I know. Just can't get him to hush at all is the idea here. And so it's all about it's going to be, he's going to swallow himself up there. You know, fool's lips going to consume him. I have some notes here in some 4 areas. His reputation, Ecclesiastes 10 and 3, and his character, James 3 and 6 there. His impact for good, import for good, and ultimately going to consume himself. And so the Lord put it this way in Matthew chapter 12 and 36 and 7. Every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. By the words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. That kind of scares me sometimes. I stop and think back some of the things that's come out of me, you know. You have to be careful. What we say is important, and how we say it's important. And so we need to be particular in that in every way. There's a process. And go on down, he talks about the idea, and the 15, the labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. What kind of fellow is it that doesn't know how to go to town? Yeah. He's so smart he don't even know how to get from one place to another, and go the wrong way. Woe unto thee, O land, when thy king is a child, thy princes eat in the morning. The picture is that of a king who is like unto a child, and his princes are those, what are they doing in the morning? They're eating when they ought to be doing what? Get out working. So he said, blessed art thou, O land, verse 17, when the king is the son of nobles, and the princes eat in due season, for strength and not for drunkenness. And so those who are serving God, they're eating and taking care of themselves in the proper time. By much slothfulness, 18, the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through. Leave a house alone, what's going to happen to it? There you go. It will. It will. I don't know, 15 or more years, I guess, Frida's mother's house been empty for several years, and got to the point to either bulldoze it or salvage it. I've been salvaging it for about 15 years now. They're going. I know one person, for example, who's had some difficult times, what have you, and they weren't foolish people. They were living in a house, they had to bring boards in, laying the trailers in the trailer, so they could walk on the floor without falling through. Life can get tough, brother. And feast, verse 19, made for laughter. Wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. So says who? Yeah, the foolish man. Our life is spent to the idea that we can feast and make merry and get all the money we can, so that's going to answer all our questions, will it not? And so, curse not the king, no, not in thy thought, and curse not the rich in the bedchamber, for a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. So when he says, curse not the king, in other words, the king may be that foolish fellow who's reigning, what have you. What's to be our attitude toward that person? Do we go around running him down? And if you do say something negative about it, what's going to happen? Everybody's going to hear it, aren't they? You can't keep a secret. That's the way it goes. Chapter 11 there, he goes on in some of the things. He talks about some recommendations here for a happy life. Let's see what it says. Cast your bread upon the waters, and for thou shalt find it after many days. That's a picture of doing what? That's benevolent work? Yeah. What you do, you get back. Give a portion to 7, also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth. What about this side of giving a portion to 8 or 7 or 8? What about 9? All right, do that? Yeah. It's figurative language. 7 is usually for a number for fullness or completeness, and so don't draw the line in the process there. And he talks about the idea of the clouds being full of rain. They empty themselves upon the earth, and the tree fall toward the south, toward the north, and in the place where the tree falls, there it shall be. Can't do anything about it. He that observeth the wind shall not do what? Verse 4. He that regardeth the clouds shall not. So here's a farmer out here. He says, you know, the wind is too high today. You know, I can't go out here and sow this seed, or the rain look like it might rain. You can't go out there and do it today. Then what's going to happen to his harvest? As they say back up in the hills, he ain't going to have an iron, is it? There you go. Thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, or I like this in verse 5. Thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, nor how the bones do grow in the womb of her that is with child. Even so, thou knowest not the works of God, who maketh all. And when you stop and think about the amazing process Brian, through which a child is formed, and the bones will grow, and the muscles are put there, and gets into a living being like that. We don't know how that is. There's not a doctor on the face of this earth can explain that, the process. And what about, that's one of God's works. How much of God's works can we know? Do what, Ralph? That's it, whatever he reveals to us, isn't it? We'll never know all of his works. Sow in the morning, sow your seed in the evening, withhold not thine hand. Get up early and go to work, don't quit to get evening. Thou knowest not whether shall prosper either this or that, or whether both shall be alike good. So, get on up, get out there, sow your seed, work like you're supposed to be working, do what you need to be doing. You don't know whether it's going to come out good or not. Really, do you? But it either will or it won't. One thing for sure, if you don't get up and go, what's going to happen for sure? It's not going to do it in the process. You need to be thinking about those things in the process. And so the wise man is going to just labor all of his days. He's going to get in there and keep on keeping on and not quit until he gets through in the process there. And if a man live many years, rejoice in them all. Let him remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that cometh is vanity. Tell me about the days of darkness. What do you think it has reference to? Huh? Probably so. Or, talking about in contrast on one who lives for many years, and in contrast to living for many years, there's a time when he's not going to be living. How long is that going to last? Long, long time. That's as far as the earth is concerned. Yeah. All that cometh is vanity. All we're going through on this earth, if it were not for God and his will and direction, will be complete vanity. So it comes down to verse 9. Time to begin serving God is when? When you're youth. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth. Let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Go, live, work, do good, but always remember there's going to be the day of God's judgment. That's good to remember. We need that. We need it very, very much. And so, surely do. While the sun, or the light, or the moon, or the stars be not darkened, or the clouds return after the rain. Well, let's go back up and pick up verse 10 before we leave it. Therefore remove sorrow from thine heart, and put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. So, that means we ought not depreciate childhood? That's not it, is it? The idea that childhood is a time to go back and to remember who. Yeah. In thy youth, the Creator, God. Verse 12, to remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Verse 1, chapter 12. Remember now thy Creator. And so there's some interesting expressions here down in chapter 12. And let's see if we can kind of go through these and pick some of them out. Verse 2, while the sun, the light, or the moon, and the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain, and the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, I think it's bow, it may be bow, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out the window be darkened. But what about this idea? We're talking about when the sun and the light and the moon and the stars be not darkened. Do what? Yeah, when you're still young, youth, getting around. Then he goes back this, he says, and the clouds return after the rain. And then he says, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. That's the keepers of the house in your hands, in your arms. What about the strong men shall bow themselves? What would that be? legs. Yeah. What about your grinders? There are a few. What's that? That's your teeth, Ralph. That's exactly right. Look out the windows, be darkened. You can see. Sight's going. The doors shall be shut in the streets, and when the sound of the grinder is low, and he shall rise up with the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low, if you will. I'm not so sure about this idea the doors shall be shut in the street, and so I think that might be a good idea on it, Ralph. I sure do. And you don't have the movement back and forth and roundabout as you normally would in the process there. What about rising up the voice of a bird? You know, wake up, can't stay asleep, don't get good night's sleep. Daughters of music shall be brought low. Probably having reference to maybe your voice is not able to produce. I don't know. That's what one thought's been put on it. And what about being afraid of that which is high? I don't know, but some of us don't climb ladders anymore. There's a reason for that. Huh? Well, yeah, danger to fall, and and fears shall be in the way. Be careful, you don't stumble, maybe fall on something. Almond tree shall flourish. Perhaps your hair is turning gray or something like that, you reckon? What about the grasshopper shall be a burden? Don't go around picking up 50, 70 pounds anymore, do you? Yeah, you lose your strength. And desire shall fail. You just don't have the ability to get back and forth. Because man goeth to his long home. Where in the world is that? Yeah, to the day he's dead, yeah. He's going to his long home. What David tells Solomon back in 1 Kings 2, I go the way of all the earth. That's what he said, yeah. And because man and the mourners go about the street, that's because he goes the way of the earth. Or ever the silver cord is loose, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken in the cistern. Probably has references basically the same thing. Has to do with what? The end of one's life. The end of it. And verse 7, a familiar verse to us. Then shall the dust, that's it, when it does that, dust shall return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. This is Solomon, after all he's been through and considered. And it says in 9, moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught people knowledge. Yea, he gave good heed, and sought out, and set in order many proverbs. I believe it's in 2 Kings 17 or 30. He spoke some 3,000 proverbs. Huh? Sound right? Yeah, 3,000 proverbs. Yeah. And let's go back and notice a thing from a hermeneutical perspective for just a moment, verse 9 and 10. It says the preacher was wise and he taught the people knowledge. What does it mean he taught the people knowledge? Well, it tells us, doesn't it? Gave good heed, sought out, ordered many proverbs. What's that doing? He's teaching people knowledge. Yeah. Sought to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. That's teaching people knowledge. The words of the wise are as goads, and as nails fastened by the masters of the assemblies, which are given from one shepherd. What does it mean the words are as goads? What's the goad? Yeah.
Like a trick, get your horse moving.
Yeah, okay. Get on with it. And nails fashioned by masters, kind of like the picture of a building. It's put together in such a way that it's not going to come apart. And given by one shepherd. Verse 12, and further, by these, my son, be admonished. Here's where the student likes now. Of the making of many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. Any amens? That's a great joy too. Here's the conclusion of the whole matter. Here it is. Here's what it's all about, Solomon says. After all that Solomon has said, all he's talked, all he's reviewed, all the analysis, the evaluations that he's made relative to things under the sun, he says this is the whole picture right here. Fear God. Keep his commandments. He says this is the whole of man. The text says duty of man, but what is man? He's a person. He's to fear God and to keep God's commandments. Just that simple, if you will. Why? Well, God's going to bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or evil. That's your memory verse, by the way. That's your memory verse. I wanted to quickly, we have a few minutes, I wanted to quickly go back and check on our study questions. If I brought my study questions with me, I might have pulled a Brother Gilbert here. Let's see if I did. Okay. There's a final exam. I brought that. Sorry about that. And let's see, right here some questions. Let's look at chapter 10 there. And dead flies. Simply points out that one foolish act can destroy a lifetime of what? Good reputation for wisdom and honor. 84, wise man's heart is in his right hand. Fool's heart is in his left. Number 85, the folly that is set in great dignity would be what's pictured in verse 5, the foolish ruler. General point of the lessons 8 and 9 is we should be wise and cautious, whatever endeavor we take. Proverbs says, whoso diggeth a pit shall fall therein, in Proverbs, I've forgotten where it is. And he that rolleth a stone, it will return upon him. Verse 8 is number 87. According to verse 11, the babbler like the what who bites without warning? Serpent. Characteristic of a fool's words is that they are usually many and always, madness, mischievous madness, yeah, that's it. For he knoweth not how to go in the city is probably a proverbial statement expressing gross what? Ignorance about even the most obvious matters. The princes eat in the drunkenness, morning, when they should have been at work. Should have been at work. Things thought to be said in complete privacy almost always do what? Yeah, they get out, though. The little bird told me. That's another little idiom, isn't it? Little bird told me. And so, going on into this section on the recommendations for a happy life, cast your bread means to do what? Good, without hope or expectation of return. Meaning of 7, verse 2, basically is what? Basically give to what? All who have need. Person in verse 4 is waiting for the what and what before he sows. Right? Time and circumstance before he sows. And so he's going to miss his opportunities, the idea there, I think. General number 95, the general lesson of verses 3 through 8 is the wise man cheerfully does all his days. He does what? Labors all his days. Do good while he can. Young man must always remember to conduct himself in view of the fact of whose judgment? God's judgment. Chapter 12, inconvenience of an old age. They're called the evil what in verse 1? Evil, called evil days. And evil days. Some of us are living in the evil days, Brother Reggie. Identify the points of the allegory. Allegory, 2 through 6. Sun, moon, stars are darker. And means what grows dim. Eyes grow dim, nearing the end of life. Keepers of the house tremble. That's probably your hands and your arms. Strong men bow, that means his legs, getting feeble in old age. His grinders in next verse, number D is what? Teeth. Those that look out the windows are those what? Eyes, the dimness of eyes, failing of sight. Doors shut in the street. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Some think this has to do with the mouth, but I have difficulty seeing it. It's from Psalm 141:3. Street being the mouth and the throat, etc., through which food passes, but I don't know. Sound of grinding, verse number G. Yeah, sound of grinding. Hearing, and perhaps someone says maybe it's the noise made by the masticating of the chewing. One shall rise up at the voice of a bird, which means he does what lightly? Sleeps lightly, daughters of music brought low. What loses its strength? Voice. Terror shall be in the way. He's afraid of falling. Desire shall fail, loses his strength or purpose to continue. And the silver cord, golden bowl, pitcher wheel, life ends. Verse 10 tells us Solomon's writings were what? Upright, even words of truth. Number 100, the one shepherd would be who? Yeah, God or the Lord. The conclusion of the whole matter is fear and keep his. The word fear in this context, by definition, basically means to revere or to reverence. Okay. I want to give you the test that I have. So. I'm going to go ahead and pass these out so you can take a look at them. I believe that's to be the ones right there, Brother Ralph. I think this is the way that we're going about the grading of this particular review. On questions 1 through 9 or 3 through 9, I'm going to recommend you might want to use your notes or comments. And then on the true and false, I'd like to ask you to do those from memory. Phyllis says you got a 50-50 chance of making it either way you go, right? Important, and got your points here. Having read the book of Ecclesiastes, I think we suggest you read that how many times? Twice. Completed the study questions for the book of Ecclesiastes. You only have to do that once. Okay? And then here's some of the things that I want you to give some thought to, where it says, write a brief response to the following issues. And here's respond to this charge, for example. Ecclesiastes is not an inspired book because certain statements in Ecclesiastes contradict other teachings of the Bible. So we talked about that some, especially in chapter 9, I think. It just fellas said, just common sense prevails in that if you want to. And number 2 under that says respond to the charge. Since there are so many varied opinions how the Song of Solomon should be interpreted, then it's useless for us to study this book. I have found that the book of Ecclesiastes is one of the really down-to-earth studies that we have in the Bible. So I don't think you're going to have any problem with verse number 4, a few words, a theme of the book of Ecclesiastes. And 5, where can we read the historical background for Solomon? I think you have that in your notes, so you don't have a problem there. And 6, what do you consider the most important key in understanding Ecclesiastes? The fellow says if you miss that one, you miss the book. It's right here. And give the verses which state the final conclusion. That's really your memory verse, so you ought to treat that as a memory verse if you would, please. And then number 8 talks about a brief explanation of these following statements. No new thing under the sun. You'll have no problem with that. No difference between man and beast. All go into one place. All are of the dust and turn to dust again. So, and then about chapter 9, verse 5, the dead know not anything. Some of the living don't either. And number parentheses 4 says, no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. These are verses in chapter 9 especially where people really like to take off on a tangent with. And I like number 5, cast your bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days. And then number 9 there, what do you consider the most valuable lesson or lessons learned in Ecclesiastes? Give at least 2. And since that is basically subjective, not much way you can miss that one there, okay? Everybody good with that? Next week, Lord willing, we're going to begin our study in the Song of Solomon. And by the way, this says final exam, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. It's just on Ecclesiastes, top page there. So Song of Solomon has absolutely nothing to do with this text. But that's the class that we're in. Okay. What do you think? Quit while we're ahead? Gilbert, how about you leading in the closing prayer for us?
Father, we graciously thank you for leading us, guiding us, reminding us, instructing us, and teaching us. And we pray you continue in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. We only have 3 more classes, brother.